Now let's take a look at different influenza formulations over the past few years. In general, the flu vaccines are either trivalent or quadrivalent. And what that means is that the trivalent vaccine will target 3 different strains of the flu, and a quadrivalent vaccine will target 4 different strains of the flu. So in general, trivalents target 2 influenza A strains and 1 influenza B strain, and quadrivalents will do 2 influenza A and 2 influenza B strains. Now, since prior to 2021-2022, we essentially had trivalent and quadrivalent formulations available at the same time, so people could choose whether they want trivalent or quadrivalent. However, since 2021-2022 influenza season, all vaccines have been quadrivalent until 2024-2025, where we switched to trivalent specifically. And that's essentially because since COVID started in 2020, we have not observed a Yamagata lineage of influenza B. So essentially it has been eradicated. So there's really no need for that to be included in the flu vaccine. So Yamagata has been removed from all formulations starting 2024-2025 season. Now, so all trivalent vaccines essentially have H1N1 and H3N2. For 2024-2025, we're using the same H1N1 as last year. What's getting updated is the H3N2, so it's getting updated. And something to note is that the version that's in the egg-based vaccine is slightly different than what's in the cell-cultured and recombinant vaccine. So depending on whether you're getting egg-based vaccine or cell-cultured, you get slightly different vaccines in regards to that. And then for influenza B, we still have the Victoria lineage, which essentially has remained the same for the last 3 years. CDC recommends routine annual seasonal influenza immunization for all persons aged 6 months or older who do not have contraindications. Now, there are no preferential recommendations for one influenza vaccine product over another, except specifically for adults aged 65 years or older, which we will cover on a later slide. Now, in general, it takes about 2 weeks on average for the body to fully respond to the vaccines and mount antibodies, so keep that in mind. And vaccination should be offered during September and October and continue through flu season while unexpired vaccine supplies last. And for non-pregnant adults, early vaccination, for example, when the vaccine becomes available in July and August, should be avoided unless there is concern that the later vaccination might not be possible. So if somebody's in their 3rd trimester in July, for example, they may go ahead and receive the vaccine. We'll talk more about vaccination during pregnancy on a later slide. And of course, COVID-19 vaccines can be co-administered with influenza vaccines. It's been shown both safe and effective. Here's a summary of the available influenza vaccine formulations for the 2024-2025 season. So we have a live attenuated influenza vaccine, so FluMist, which is egg-based. And this is specifically for age 2 years through 49. So remember, people under the age 2 or 50 and older are at risk of complications with influenza. So because this formulation is less effective, we want to make sure that those people who are at high risk of complications get the more effective vaccine. So it's actually not FDA approved for outside of age 2 to 49. Then we have inactivated influenza vaccines. So these are not live, but they are all egg-based. So there are different formulations. So these are all trivalent, by the way, everything in this table. And this is for age 6 months and older. Then we have our first non-egg-based. So this is cell-cultured vaccine. So cell-based refers to how the flu vaccine is made. Most inactivated influenza vaccines are produced by growing influenza viruses in eggs. The influenza viruses used in cell-based vaccines are grown in cultured cells of mammalian origin, specifically in canine kidney cells, instead of in hen's eggs. So therefore, it's unlikely to have egg proteins in it. Next, we have our second non-egg based formulation, so recombinant influenza vaccine. So this is essentially using recombinant DNA technology to make this in in the lab, and this is specifically for age 18 and older. Now, the last two options that are specifically approved for age 65 and older, so for our senior citizens, one has an adjuvant, so it's adjuvanted inactivated influenza vaccine. And the adjuvant in it essentially enhances immunogenicity. So because at older age, the immune system is not as robust. So in order to get a better immune response, an adjuvant has been added to the vaccine. And the last one is just like our regular vaccines, except it has a higher dose. So again, just to get a better response out of immune system in older age, a much higher dose is in the vaccine in order to achieve that. Now you can see that the majority of these vaccines are egg-based with the exception of two. So, most products that you will administer to patients are developed in eggs, which brings us to the question, what if the patient has egg allergy? Although not common, you may come across patients who have egg allergy. As I mentioned, majority of the influenza vaccine formulations are grown in eggs. Both cell culture grown and recombinant influenza vaccines are considered egg-free. The recombinant vaccine utilizes recombinant DNA technology to manufacture the vaccine, and the cell culture grown vaccine utilizes mammalian cells instead of eggs. So should we only give recombinant influenza vaccine to patients with egg allergy? Well, first, it's important to know that CDC recommends considering patient observation for 15 minutes after administration of any vaccine, not just the flu shot, and regardless of whether they have had allergies or not. Secondly, regardless of reaction to egg exposure, even if anaphylaxis, the recommendation is that all persons aged 6 months or older with egg allergy who do not have contraindications should receive any licensed and recommended influenza vaccine, including the egg-based vaccine. The bottom line is that egg allergy is not a contraindication to receiving egg-based influenza vaccine. Now, what if the patient had allergy to a previous influenza vaccine ingredients and not just egg allergy? We can consider three different groups. So one would be people with an allergy to egg-based vaccine. The second group would be people with allergy to cell-cultured vaccine. And last would be people with history of reaction to a recombinant vaccine. So in general, when the CDC says precaution when it comes to allergies, use should occur in an inpatient or outpatient medical setting under supervision of a provider who can recognize and manage a severe allergic reaction. And of course, vaccine components can be found in a package insert. So for the first group, those who have allergy to egg-based influenza vaccines, any egg-based vaccine, it's contraindicated for these patients. However, they may receive a non-egg-based vaccine, so either a cell-cultured and recombinant. Now, again, this has nothing to do with eggs. This has to do with allergy to an egg-based vaccine. Now, for the second group, who, if they had an allergy to a cell-cultured inactivated influenza vaccine, any egg-based is contraindicated as well as the cell culture vaccine. However, they may receive, cautiously a recombinant influenza vaccine. And of course, last group, if they had a history of allergy to recombinant, again, egg-based is contraindicated as well as recombinant influenza vaccine, but they may cautiously receive cell-cultured influenza vaccine. And of course, if it is unknown which influenza vaccine they had a reaction to, then an allergist can be consulted to figure out if it's okay for the patient to receive a vaccine. Now, what are vaccine considerations during pregnancy? So persons who are pregnant or postpartum should receive any inactivated influenza vaccine or recombinant influenza vaccine, as long as this is before or during the flu season. and can be given before pregnancy and during all trimesters of pregnancy, but in general, limited data during the first trimester. The live attenuated vaccine should not be used. It's actually contraindicated during pregnancy. And in general, there is less experience with more recently licensed inactivated influenza vaccines, such as all the quadrivalents that are available on the market and the cell cultured based vaccine. And there is limited data with recombinant influenza vaccine. Now, for immunocompromised patients, the same recommendation is made. So either inactivated influenza vaccine or the recombinant, and of course, inactivated either egg-based or cell cultured. Similar to pregnancy, and live attenuated should not be used. So the live attenuated, because they replicate in the body, they should not be used immunocompromised because it can replicate, and get out of control due to immunocompromise. Last, what if the patient is taking influenza antiviral medications? Now, administration of inactivated or recombinant is not affected by antiviral agents. However, if somebody is to take the live attenuated because that vaccine needs to replicate in the body, antiviral medications will affect the vaccine efficacy. And when it comes to our antiviral agents used for the flu, the half-life makes a difference. So, some of these, such as Pramivir and Baloxavir, have much longer half-life. Whereas oseltamivir and zanamivir have shorter half-life. So in general, the live attenuated influenza vaccine will have reduced effectiveness if oseltamivir is taken within 2 days before and up to 14 days after. So in other words, if somebody is taking oseltamivir for an actual infection or for either prophylaxis or whatever reason, and they are to receive a live attenuated, they should wait 2 days after discontinuing oseltamivir to start vaccination. And then once vaccination is given, they should wait at least 14 days before they can receive, for whatever indication, another dose of oseltamivir. And the same concept applies to Pramivir and Baloxavir, but the timing is different. So for Pramivir, 5 days before and up to 14 days after. The 14 days is because it takes, on average 2 weeks for the vaccine to kick in. So, once it's given, regardless of which one it is, you want to wait 14 days for the vaccine to replicate and mount a response. And then the other ones, the 2 days, 5 days, and 17 days, you essentially waiting for these drugs to be cleared from the body based on the half-life and then give the vaccination. Now, what if the patient is elderly, and that's defined as age 65 years or older? So there are 3 preferential recommendations. So either the high-dose inactivated influenza vaccine or the recombinant influenza vaccine, which essentially has a higher dose than the standard dose inactivated influenza vaccine, or an adjuvanted inactivated influenza vaccine. And of course, they do say that if none of these are available in the pharmacy, then any other age-appropriate influenza vaccine should be used. So any vaccine is better than no vaccine. So you don't want, in other words, if somebody's at the pharmacy and these 3 are not available, you do not want to, order it and have the patient come back, because there is a good chance that they may not come back. So any opportunity to vaccinate individuals is very important, because any vaccination is better than no vaccination. And the reason these 3 are preferred over others is that, for one, the high dose was studied against the standard dose, and these are specifically in the trivalent vaccines where they did the randomized controlled trial, and they found that the high dose was superior to the standard dose. Specifically, it had about 24% greater relative efficacy compared to the standard dose. And when it comes to recombinant compared to the standard dose, again, recombinant has slightly higher dose in it. So in elderly, they also saw higher efficacy, so about 30% greater relative efficacy compared to the standard dose. And of course, the adjuvanted Fluad uses MF59 as an adjuvant to increase immunogenicity, which showed about 63% greater relative efficacy. Now, for 2024-25 season, there are new recommendations for immunocompromised patients. So not only does the CDC continue to recommend to avoid live attenuated vaccines and prefer inactivated influenza vaccine and recombinant, but there's also recommendation that solid organ transplant recipients aged 18 to 64 who are receiving immunosuppressive medication regimens may receive either the high dose or adjuvanted as acceptable options. So remember, these two are only approved for age 65 and older. They're saying that although these patients are not 65 yet, you can consider them, but they make it clear that this is not a preference. So it's not that we prefer to give high dose and adjuvant, but you can consider it in order to potentially improve immunogenicity because these people's immune system is not as robust. This concludes this presentation.